there's no one looking over your shoulder helping here.
You know, and the scarier part is, you know, back then, you know, my friends, family were kind of, you know, at that moment laughing at you. It's like, what are you doing? So it was always like you're second guessing yourself, you know?
The people that love you the most are second guessing you, and it makes it even tougher.
And you're thinking, well, maybe they have it figured out, you know? They went straight for a 4-year degree. They got, you know, a new car, and it's like, you know, I'm doing something wrong here, I guess. It's still really scary at that time, you know, but I knew I had to do something.
This is a supplement. Like, this doesn't have to be the end all be all. You can still go all in. You can still be pot committed and still have that money coming in. Because guess what? You're going to need it for the next project, right? Like, people just underestimate and assume because everyone on social media says so that you don't need money. You need capital.
But
like,
that's the grind, though. That's the grind that people don't want to commit to.
Bienvenidos a otro episodio de Straight Up Chicago Podcast de inversionistas. Yo soy Horacio Tristan y como siempre su anfitrión 𝗤𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵.
Keeping the first take. I love it.
First take,
First take, done.
That was awesome. So now we've had the intro in Polish and we've had the intro in Spanish. So
I threw in the little soccer thing. That's why I was like, you know,
oh
the
man,
goal.
I love it.
That was beautiful.
That was great. Like,
Nice, all right,
First
cool.
shot, man. So
You're so soft-spoken, too, throughout the whole episode. I was like, oh, man, he's not going to want to do the intro. And he's like, do you mind if I do it in Spanish? I was like, mind. We were joking, though. We were like, if you're going to say something off the cuff. And I was like, oh, we know what Bendale means. Don't say it. Like, don't call me that. So,
man, what a great show this was. 20 years of experience. Like, I love getting, there's so many different, when someone's been doing this for 20 years, there's so many different seasons of their life that you go through, you know, whether it be from their first house to their first multifamily to, you know, somewhere in there, they got a couple personal residents, they got married, they got divorced, whatever it might be. Like, you go through a whole, like, larger part of their life when you're breaking this down. And today is an episode like that.
it also just comes back to, and I mean, it's not like a broken record, but every time I meet up, like, someone's like, oh, I'm going to quit my W-2 job and go wholesale or whatever. It's like, dude, just get the house. Like, get a property, then get another one, and then, like, whatever, figure it out from there. Like, just go get the property. If you don't have income coming in, how are you going to do this? How are you going to buy the next one? Like, you need to figure out how you're going to have income.
Agree. And that just takes, we talked a little bit
It's
about
not a sexy answer, though, so no one likes it.
No. Well, it takes grinding. It takes the before, the after, all that, like we talked about in the episode. And that's what a lot of people don't want to do. They want to, I don't like my job, so I just want to replace my income. But you know what? I didn't say this in the episode. I see a lot of people, when they want to quote unquote replace their income, they make worse decisions or put themselves in worse situations where it's like, I'm just going to buy a bigger building and that'll replace my income. But that building they bought sucked and they can't replace their income. So they're struggling in different ways and they end up going back and getting another job anyway. So, you don't have to, I think one of the morals of today's story is you don't have to set aside your W-2 to be super successful in real estate. And man, today's guest, he's actually doing the brokerage side, the investment side, and the day job. Like, that's sick.
Yeah, hitting on all cylinders here.
So,
all right, what do we got for our housing provider tip of the week?
all right, so housing provider tip, it's getting cold out. We already missed the September 15th date where you have to have your boilers and your heat on in the city of Chicago. But for all you new investors, make sure that you understand, Google up City of Chicago heating ordinance. Make sure you know what you're up against. Make sure you know what you're supposed to be doing because more than likely your tenants know. So when you get that no heat call or you have an issue with sufficient heat, you know exactly where you're going to get in trouble for. So
Also, just keep a few of those thermal guns in your car. Right,
Yeah.
like that's just have them on you.
that was a tip in the past too when a tenant is saying that there's not enough heat. If you get the thermal gun and you take a picture with that temperature on that gun that is at least proof if someone does drag you in court later.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's jump in. Today's guest referred to us from 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗵𝘁. We appreciate the referral. For anyone out there, if you know someone will be a good guest, please keep them coming. We talk about, I didn't keep track, 7, 8 neighborhoods. Like, we cover a lot. So we have a Chicagoan here, born in Bryant Park, Chicagoan through and through, currently with 𝗖𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗁𝐺. A ton of knowledge from both before the crash, during the crash, after the crash, both from the investor side and from the leasing and helping out as an agent. So without further ado, Horacio, Tristan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are we doing today?
Thank you. Doing great.
All right, so shout out to 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗵𝗁. He's episode 308, I believe. I looked it up. I hope that number is correct. But he made the connection. How do you and Alex know each other?
It's funny. I had a listing that was a rental, and one of his colleagues, that's another realtor, called me. Am I listening? He's like, would you be willing to sell it? Would your client be willing to sell it? And I said, sure. So I talked to my client. I said, here's the numbers. I think it works for you now to sell it instead of holding it. And then after the deal, Alex closed that one. He called me, and of course, let's have a 20-minute meeting, so on and so forth. And so it kind of kicked off from there. I don't necessarily always have a go-to lender or, go-to any of the above for my clients, but I always like to recommend people. And so with him, I said, all right, well, we'll have a conversation. And, we struck it up. I was in the middle of buying a primary residence at the moment. So I said, okay, if you can make this happen, because it gets a little complicated with I have a W-2 job plus the investments and, the losses taken from the investments and being a realtor. I said, if you can make this happen smoothly, then, cool. I can refer you as well. So that's how we ended up meeting back in 2018.
Oh, so you guys known each other a while.
Yeah, for a few years now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Also, just a great move by him. You do a deal with someone, just take that ask for that 20-minute call. You might get told no, nothing might come out of it, but every once in a while you'll get some nice hits and some nice wins out of it.
Absolutely.
So, all right, you mentioned the W-2 job. We won't go into too much detail, but you work for the government. Little bit of a clearance level here. How did you get started there? Like, did you know growing up this is something you wanted to do?
No, it's funny. I think, I grew up in Brighton Park, so of course, didn't have too many, I guess, role models that could say, hey, you should do real estate, you should become an accountant, so on and so forth. A very blue collar neighborhood. Back then it was primarily Hispanic. And so I think we all kind of came from the same parents in the factory jobs kind of situation. So we didn't really know what we wanted to do for a lot of us. Back then I wanted to be a DJ, I wanted to be a promoter growing up. Things didn't work out. And so I said, okay, I need something. And so I'm like, okay, I want to become a police officer. At the time it was very competitive to get on to the police force. It was taking years. So I said, okay, let me start putting in for the federal stuff. I never wanted to leave Chicago, but I said, I gotta do something. And so when I started applying for the federal jobs, I got hired. It was a lot faster. So I kind of fell into that line of work, just wanting to do something to make a living. And, back then thinking that going for a W-2 job was kind of the only way to make it work.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you have a pension. There's a lot of great things here. When did you start when did like the entrepreneur side of you come out then?
That really came out back when I was DJing and promoting as a kid. I mean, at 16 years old, we were doing, raves. We were, booking live bands. And then it kind of started there. Of course, it was kind of stifled when things didn't work out because, we didn't understand saving and investing and everything else. So that was a tough lesson to learn. I went back to college and, finished up my degree. And when I got my first job out of college, same thing. I was still bartending on the side. I had, a job working for CPS as an investigator in the field for public transportation. But there was no real benefits there because I was a direct CPS employee. And that's when I said, okay, I can't keep working my ass off and not have anything to show for it. Here I am, I'm bartending still on the side. I said, I'll use this as my fun money, but I need to do something. And that's when I bought my first condo to kind of just start building something out of it.
Where was that at?
So my first one was on 30th and Michigan in South Commons, right outside of Bronzeville.
Yeah. All right. What timeline for us? When is this?
So that happened back in 2002 when I bought my first place.
Okay. And then did you buy the condo? You're living there?
So I was living in a condo. I remember it was, back in the days of, 100% financing. So I did a 0% down.
Didn't need
FHA
Alex
loan.
at the time. Just
didn't know
just
him
needed
at
the
all.
pulse.
And then I didn't want to keep paying rent, and so I said, okay, let me. I didn't know any good realtors that were investors or anything. I think that would have helped me out a lot. But I said, okay, let me just buy this place, and eventually its values are going to go up, and I started there.
Got it. You still own that one?
I recently sold that one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I recently sold it.
So you held it through the downturn, back up, like
absolutely. And it was rented out, and it was okay, and it was rented out. But of course, now taxes started going up a bit there. The HOA fees started going up more there. So I think this year I said, okay, my last tenant left. Time to let it go.
Got it. All right. So after the condo, what happens next, right? You have something that you're living in, which is awesome. You're working a W-2. Are in your head, are you saying, all right, let's double down here? Or is it more gradual than that?
Absolutely. So then I started my master's program, and I said, okay, well, even though I'm working full time, working on my master's, still bartending on the side, I said, okay, I need to make something happen with this. So I took out a student loan, even though I didn't need it for the master's. I said, I'm going to take this money, and back then put it down as one of the first investors at Paramount Lofts on Ogden and Ashland. So this is before the West Loop was even the West Loop. So I remember it was $5,000 down to secure my spot, and then $5,000 later, and that project was in 2003, but it didn't get completed until 2005. And but yeah, that's
So you just sit there and wait, sweat it out for
a couple of years, yeah. But I knew that the West Loop, because my master's is in urban planning with an emphasis on economic development. So I already knew what was happening, the development that was going on. I saw what the West Loop was becoming. So I knew, okay, eventually it's going to grow to Ashland, which we've already gotten past that.
We're past there now. It's
absolutely
insane.
Man, that building, I remember, the price had gone up considerably in the sense, but I remember passing because I didn't want to go up from 145 to 148 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in that building. Like that was, I'm like, I'm not paying more than 145, and I held my guns to it. And man, there's a lot of steals because there's so many investors that bought in that building. There's a lot of great deals. I'm sure you had to deal with some of that, but when the downturn came, so.
Even after the downturn. So my frame of reference on this is like 10, 12 years ago, I had season tickets for the Bulls and I was working downtown, and not the winter games, but the spring games. My wife would take the train down. We'd walk there. It's like 2 miles. Like we'd walk a mile, have a beer at Weston, walk the last mile. It's a nice little, but we did that for a 4 or 5 year period. And that walk got a lot better. That over that period, even that
Absolutely.
Just cranes in the air the entire time. It was just unbelievable going down Randolph, going down Madison, like just unreal.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to that downturn, I got really lucky. So when I got hired with Uncle Sam, it was in 2006. And so at the time, it wasn't for Chicago. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the job. By then, I had moved into Paramount. I was renting out the first condo. I said, all right, I did a short-term rental just in case. I said, maybe I'll come back to Chicago. And that tenant, the second tenant that was in the unit, called me one day and said, I'll buy it off of you right before the downturn. And I'm like, okay, well, here's my number. And I had bought it at 205, and I think my number was 267. I said, 267, and we got a deal. She called a realtor. The realtor called me. He's like, hey, I put together an offer, will you pay me a commission? Absolutely. Here's my number, 267. You can add your 2% or whatever you want on top of that, but here's what I want to net. I didn't hear a call for another week or so. No big deal. She's still paying rent. So I got a call a week after that. It's like, fine, I'll take it. 265 is the max. I'm like, all right, cool. So I sold it, made a profit there right before the downturn. And instead of just taking the money and paying off my student loans or something like that, now we get closer towards the election and before the market meltdown. So we figured, okay, we see signs of the bubble. I figured between either president, whether at the time Obama won or, whether it would have been, I forgot who it was for the Republicans at the moment, but had that carried on as well, somebody's going to stop this downturn. So I bought a 2-flat in Avondale with the proceeds instead of paying off my student loans.
And Avondale in 2008 is not Avondale today.
No, absolutely not. It was, Avondale is reminiscent of like Brighton Park, Would you pay? Back then I paid, because it was turnkey. Again, I still didn't understand investing. And, I ended up buying a turnkey 2-flat on Monticello, and I paid $385 back then.
Man, so going back, you still haven't found bigger pockets. You still haven't found like a mentor. This is all still, I don't want to say reckless because you're doing your own due diligence, but there's no one looking over your shoulder helping here.
And the scarier part is, back then, my friends, family were kind of, at that moment laughing at you. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah. Why are you moving to Bronzeville? Why are you going like west of Ashland? It's It's like, why are you buying something in Avondale? So it was always like you're second guessing yourself. You
The
know,
people that love you the most are second guessing you, and it makes it even tougher.
absolutely. You know, and you're thinking, well, maybe they have it figured out. You know, they went straight for a 4-year degree. They got, you know, a new car, and it's like, you know, going back to, I hadn't read, you know, Rich Dad Poor Dad yet either. You know, so I'm thinking, I'm doing something wrong here, I guess. You know? And you know, so it's still really scary at that time. You know, but I knew I had to do something.
Yeah. So then did you live in the Avondale one? Like you rent out, did you house hack that, or was that just pure investment?
No, that was pure investment. I was commuting still from DC, so I would come back and forth on my days off whenever possible. So I said, let me rent both floors, and you know, I'll stay with my parents, with friends when I come into town, and you know, that's kind of what I was doing.
Okay. All right. So now like you're on a third deal. This is starting to become real, right? In your head, like, all right, I'm going to keep churning these out one a year.
And not yet. So at that point, my dad had a 2-flat growing up, so I kind of helped him out.
In Brighton Park?
And this was in Logan Square. We used to live in Brighton Park, so I'd go with him everywhere to, you know, go check on it in Logan Square. He had one of his best friends that used to rent one of the units that in the 2-flat. So this friend ended up buying his own 2-flat, but instead of moving in, you know, long story short, this is in the early 80s, instead of him moving in, he's like, well, I'm getting a good deal from my compadre, you know, his best friend. I guess I'll rent my building out and I'll stay here. I'm paying less in rent to him. So, you know, he was like buying one a year. And during, you know, the recession of the 80s, when he got laid off, he was like, okay, cool, I got laid off. So he just took workman's comp, and then he extended it when they were offering the ready to work program. And it's like, okay, I guess I'll go learn to do something, you know, on paper. So he stayed unemployed for like 3-4 years. It's like, how does that happen? What the hell? But it's because he was like literally buying up all of Logan Square. And, you know, for my dad, it was a little tougher when he was getting laid off every year. He'd try to, you know, compensate through working, you know, cash jobs or whatever it is. And then, you know, you kind of notice, like, I guess is when the light bulb comes on after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. You see the two differences. And so I'm like, well, I would ask him questions and back then, and it's like, well, maybe I am doing something right here. I'm trying to figure it out. So he was a lot of help, you know, in figuring it out.
So a lot of what you've done seems like it's been a reflection on some of the stuff you were exposed to even as a kid. And it's funny, like you don't realize what you're seeing when you're young with your dad and his friend, but when you're trying to justify what you're doing or if it's the right thing to do, you fall back on what you saw growing up, which is beneficial to some people. Obviously that affects other people negatively.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, my siblings, my friends, they were all like, nah, I'm not going to invest. I'm not going to bother. So I'm thinking, again, I'm the black sheep here, you know? So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to keep it going. I'm too deep in at this point already.
Got it. So what happens after Avondale?
So the market meltdown happens, right? Everything crashes. So I go from 385 value to, I think, 120 when I was trying to refinance at one point. Fortunately and unfortunately, because of work, I can't short sell. I can't do a modification because I have tenants. So I can't justify purposely, you know, because again, our credit's checked, et cetera, et cetera. So I got to write it out. And then at the time,
Are you actually treading water though with the tenants? Like cash flow wise, you're
oh no, I was underwater probably like $400 or $500 a month just
Okay.
because I was at like a 7% interest rate back then.
got it on the high loan balance that you can't do anything about.
Absolutely.
And rents, I imagine, were only probably $800 or $900 maybe.
A little bit better. I think I was getting 1,200 on the two bed on the first level, and then the second level, I think I was getting like 1,700.
Oh,
so
okay. That sounds bad.
Man,
It
so
wasn't-
turnkey in Avondale was at 125 at a point. That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, when I moved back here, I had bought a primary residence in 2010, 2011, because I finally moved back to Chicago. And that was like my second, or my, I guess, next major investment. I got to live with this. I can't let it go. I'm just going to have to write it out. The condo in Bronzeville was still rented. Those values were down to like 30,000.
Yeah.
You know, And I had bought that back then at 118. So I'm like, again, got to write it out. It's rented at least.
But was it, we all know now in hindsight, ride it out. But that time it was like, is it ever going to go back up? Like, where was your head at in the moment though? Like when you saw those Bronzeville 30 grand, 35 grand, other people dumping it, all your neighbors foreclosing, like, was ride it out was really a thing? Or is it like, I'm not sure it's going to happen, but I know I can't do this?
It's, part of it was, okay, eventually something's going to happen. Plus, I had noticed during that era, the best tenants were the ones that had already foreclosed or short sold because they wanted to fix their credit. So they were great tenants. So I said, okay, my tenants are great. I'm not having problems. I unfortunately, can't try to modify because it's, I do have tenants in there. So now it's a full circle moment because again, if I purposely do short sell or foreclose, now I have issues with the day job, where I could be suspended, fired, etc. So now at this point, I'm forced to write it out. Kind of like there's no way around it.
So that kind of forced a hand. You didn't even have to really think about, am I doing the right thing? I know for me, it's like, what do I do? Do I just write it off? I mean, it becomes a business decision at that point, and you take the loss, maybe make some other money on some other things. But write it out was like, man, is write out going to be 2 years? Is it going to be 20 years? Like, and those were the things I know that were going through my head and a lot of other people I know at the time. And it was a tough time to try to think about those decisions.
Yeah. So you put your nose down, there's like a 3-4 year period where you're writing this out, you're working the W-2 job, you come back to Chicago, you end up buying. What was different? How was is a very general question. How was that Chicago landscape different in 2011 versus 08? Like, were you starting to see some recovery, or was it still just picking things off at, 60 cents on the dollar?
At that point, you started to see recovery. You started, again, luckily I had gotten my master's in urban planning and economic development. So I started to see where Avondale took, the 2 units and converted them to single family homes. Back then they were selling them at $650, $700. I'm like, okay, it's not a 2 unit, but again, these values are coming up. You see again, West Loop still started creeping out further west. You see the South Loop was still expanding, even though, there were still 50 cent on the dollar deals over there as well. I had bought a property in primary residence in Ukrainian Village, Noble Square on the border. So I figured at one point that was listed at, I believe, $900,000. So I get it as a short sale for $438K. Needed some work, but I said, okay, something's got to give. Even if I just get 50 grand out of this, I'll keep it as my primary residence 2 years. Worst case scenario, I'll sell it then, make a couple bucks, and call it a day.
So 438 down there. What do you still have that one? When did you sell
that
it?
was that was a primary residence, and I like selling my primary residence just to avoid capital gains. So I sold that one in 2016. So from 2011 to 2016, I was living there.
Okay. How well did you do on that, if you don't mind sharing?
So that one, it was my ex and I, we picked it up at 438, and then we sold it at 750.
Okay. Over a 4 or 5 year span.
Yeah. And that's really, by then I had gotten my license already, just because again, I was at a point where, I need to find tenants. And, Craigslist isn't doing it because all I'm getting is phone calls from other realtors like, hey, I'll list your place. I'll list your place. So I figured, okay, let me do it myself.
And just real quick, because a lot of our listeners weren't around back then. Like Zillow existed, but it wasn't this huge rental platform.
Correct. Yeah, there was no Zillow, no Facebook Marketplace for rentals.
It was just Craigslist, and then it would just keep You would be at the bottom by like noon the next day.
There's this period of time between Craigslist fading away and Zillow and the others come in to be big house where there's nothing, and that's kind of the time period that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this is when you see a lot of the rental companies come up. Not full scale brokerages, but more rental companies. Yeah. So I figured, okay, if I'm getting solicited by them and they're not putting them on the MLS anyway, they're just keeping them as pocket deals anyway. And they're not doing as good of a job screening because I was catching some of their mistakes, because of my training experience. I kind of said, all right, I'm going to start doing this myself. And so I said, at the moment I was waiting to switch from one job to the next within the government. But again, with the market meltdown and the budget being what it is, they kept rescinding my academy classes. So it kept getting pushed further and further where I'm like, okay, I think I'm stuck here. I'm not going to relocate from Chicago and go back to like DC or another major city. Let me just get my real estate license. And so I decided to get my real estate license in 2012, 2013, mainly to find myself deals and help friends out because they're always asking me questions about real estate. You know, I think now they saw, oh, wow, maybe something's right with what he's doing. So again, people now start coming to me and asking me questions. So that's kind of where I started to see, okay, I think I'm figuring this out here. I think I'm building something from where I'm at. And that was kind of the turning point.
Got it. All right. So this is 2013-ish, right? Like somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
What was it like working as a broker? We have a lot of brokers now. I was like, oh, this is so crazy. But like, they don't realize back then, like, it was just a different world, right? You didn't just throw this thing on the MLS and have 10 offers the next day.
Right. It was, you know, and back then, I was still with 𝗬𝗃𝗀𝗁𝗀, and they focused a lot on rentals as well. So even before I got licensed, you were allowed to work under the broker's license for 120 days. I said, okay, if I find myself a tenant and I get one deal within those 120 days, I'll continue.
Even. Yeah.
You know, and I'll continue. And if not, you know, then I'll let it go. I'm not going to take the test. So back then, I was working mainly only rentals. So for about 2 years, it was all rentals. Nobody that I knew at the moment was buying. So that's kind of what kept me motivated to continue on. It wasn't even the sales. It was just doing the rentals. And, you know, some of these buildings were paying 1 month's rent commission. So, you know, you're like, hey, I made $2,000 for 2 hours work. That's not bad. To do it on my time off, why not?
Yeah. All right. So, and then are you still buying at this point too?
So at this point now, I started buying, and this is where Nick Patterson, he was a great influence at 𝗬𝗃𝗀𝗁𝗀, and that's where, you know, I learned that my mistakes weren't mistakes, but I'm doing something right. So this is kind of where I guess I follow my own path, and I realized that whatever my friends and family were saying wasn't correct, and so now I start buying. And this is where I buy the first, you know, I always joke and say, for the price of a Hyundai, I'm going to buy a condo. So I bought another condo investment near Fort City Mall, back then for $18,000. And, you know, I think I put about $7,000 into it. And so now I'm renting that one at like $1,300 a month. So I'm cash flowing like $900 a month, you know. So I'm like, hey, it's not bad at all. And that's where I started investing more. And I bought one more in that same complex for like $22,000. But same thing, I'm getting $1,150 a month on that one. So now the numbers are really starting to work out.
Yeah. At the time, what were you getting for rent?
Back then, I was getting $1,300 for the 2-bedroom, and I think $1,150 for the 1-bedroom.
Oh, so you were getting those numbers back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Back then, and you know, this is by Fort City Mall. It's a distressed condo area. So, you know, I picked it up cheap, and again, I figured if I lose, you know, the value of a Hyundai, okay, well, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Good.
No, I was gonna say it was so amazing what you could buy for less than the price of a car back then with all that. What were the rents? You still have those 2 condos now?
No, so I sold those. I sold those back in 2018, 2019.
What's your mindset around selling? Like, maybe just those as an example. Like, what made you sell those? Opportunity costs, or?
So on those, it was the HOA was going into receivership with the city.
Okay.
It was threatened since I had bought it, but I said, okay, you know, I'll keep it for a while. I would consistently find good tenants there as well. But I had moved at that point I had a condo in Bucktown I was in. So I was moving from that one to a primary residence in single-family home in Old Irving. So I was funding my own renovation on that one. So I said, okay, I need to, the Bucktown condo hadn't sold yet. I'm like, let me just cash out my tenant left. I'll just sell it. And then this way I can keep funding construction.
I love this episode because we're talking about so many different neighborhoods. This guy's everywhere.
Well, I love that. And the other thing everyone always asks is, I need the money. How do I get started? How do I get started? And it's like, you got to get that first one, even if it's not the most ideal thing. And it becomes such an asset to you. And yes, you can hold it for the long term, but you can use it to also level up, right? We've heard that 4 or 5 times right now of taking the money and not just cashing out, be like, oh, look at the money I have, but taking it and then buying something else with it, right? And the game just keeps moving as you continue to grow.
Back to the condos, the distressed condo building. Now, just for the listeners that don't know this, you're up against a lot of challenges. Like I imagine people couldn't get financing. The 22.1 becomes impossible to kind of push through. It's not even necessary, even if you can't get financing. Talk about some of those challenges those buildings go through, because we don't talk about that ever on here.
So with that was a cash-only building, no financing available. The HOA was in disarray. They had no property manager. So I believe, if I remember correctly, it's about 160 condos total, and it was kind of self-managed, which imagine doing a 6-unit building. Now imagine 116 doors. So it is challenging. Some of the other owners don't do as good of a job with, verification under tenants, because they figure, okay, well, I'm going to get $1,000 a month. I'll let them in. And so it's more of a challenge of who the other landlords are versus what are my tenants doing? Because I had great tenants, and the rents are great in that area as well. There's a lack of quality housing that's affordable around that Fort City Midway area. So I was always getting great tenants. And so the challenge is more your neighbors versus who your tenants are.
But if your neighbor lets a Yahoo tenant in there, then that ruins your awesome tenant. Your tenant wants to move because they don't want to deal with the Yahoo or the noise or what everyone else put in. So
absolutely. So then, I have to, for a couple of years, I had to get a separate exterminator aside from what the building was doing, because that tenant, just had a roach infestation, and now they're seeping into my condo. And, I don't want to let my tenant go. Great people. So I did whatever I can to kind of, ease the pain of having to deal with their neighbors.
And the reason it's a cash-only building, we'll just put this out there, is because Fannie, Freddie, they will not loan against a building that's in receivership or has lawsuits against them. So I know we watched that building and a bunch of other buildings go through that same scenario, that all of a sudden then the values plummet because people have to dump, and they have to dump to people that can only pay cash, and then all of a sudden the cash level. So it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hilarious how much, not hilarious. It's funny how much.
The same thing.
Damn it. It's odd. It's odd how much leverage has, how big of a factor that plays in the valuation of buildings. So we learned that when rates doubled, when rates went down to 2, it's such a big trigger that I think we minimize.
Well, not even to go on a tangent, but same with FHA approved buildings. I know they talk about spot FHA and all that, but we have a building in West Chicago, a condo building that we manage 15 of the 38. But because we manage, there's so many investors in there, we can't get the FHA approved, which means you can't find the people that can get the 3 or 5% down, which means that it just kind of pulls the pricing down when your only buyer pool is cash, or someone's going to put 20% or more down. So these 200,000 2-bedroom 2-baths would be in Wheaton, or would be anywhere else in that area, would be 300,000 just because of not being FHA approved.
Yeah. All right, so you've been all over the city, right? We mentioned 5 or 6 different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, where's your portfolio? Name a few places.
So right now I have a townhome on the edge of Hyde Park in Bronzeville, which that was also foreclosure. I have a condo on the border of South Loop in McCormick Place. I recently sold the one in South Commons. I have one on Peterson Lincoln. Then I have a 4-unit in Humboldt Park, and I stay in one of the units there. And then another condo in Avondale as well.
Okay, so you're just opportunistic. You see something on the MLS, you'll give it a look, right? I don't want to say you'll go anywhere, but if the numbers look to work, you're going to take a bite at it.
Right. So I'm going to run the numbers first, and when I invest, I look at it in 2 ways. One, if I can immediately flip it or I can immediately rent it and the numbers are going to work and it's going to be positive cash flow from day one, and I know I'm going to turn around and cash out refinance if I keep it long term, and I'm going to recoup 100% of my investment, then I'll put offers in. So I'm pretty selective. I don't mind taking my time in investing. And when I help my buyers, I kind of teach them the same method. You know, if the numbers work, you know, doesn't have to be your dream home, doesn't have to be your dream investment property, as long as the numbers work.
You don't seem to be afraid of HOAs. Where have you been burned, and where do you advise people to look out for in buying condos? Because that seems to be a lot of like the sexier looking numbers these days, but it comes with that risk.
Right. So the way I look at it is in two ways. One, because you need to have a backup plan in case you can't flip it and you want to flip it. They need to allow rentals, right? Just in case. You never know what happens. Or I tell my investors, okay, there's a rental cap, so keep in mind, if you're living in it, you're gonna have to sell it right away. You can't rent it out. And if the numbers still work to sell it, then let's proceed. And for example, like the HOA now that I went into on this last condo in Avondale, pretty much non-existent because the president at the time was non-responsive. I didn't even get a 22.1, but I was doing owner financing on that one, so I said, okay, I can live with it. No big deal. And that's kind of where I knew reluctantly I was gonna have to get on the board and kind of turn things around. So immediately from that point where there was 2 other units that were in arrears, and I think there was one that was already hadn't paid in like 2 years, I immediately came in and I contacted one of the attorneys I know, and we started sending demand letters and sending them to collections. We changed a couple of the other things, and immediately, from night to day, that HOA's kind of turned around to the last 2 sales that were done were pretty seamless just because of everything I had done to make sure that HOA was on a 6-unit building, up in good standing.
Yeah, you got 3 not paying on a 6.
That's tough. That's tough
to make that work.
And so for my investors, if it's a small building like that, I'm like, you're gonna have to jump in. You're gonna have to get any HOA. You're gonna have to make these changes and be adamant about them happening. If not, then you are gonna continue to have this problem, and you're not gonna see the gains happen.
Yeah, well, everyone complains about the HOA, but the flip side of this is you're not responsible for the exterior, right? Like the amount of work orders you get should be, people are still people. You're still going to have to be involved, but it should be diminished because you're just dealing with the inside and what other noise, whatever other complaints.
Yeah, the problem you run into though with just say a 6-flat HOA, and hopefully you'll agree with me, is you could charge that $200 to $250 a month, and that goes towards some stuff. But there's never enough in that $200 to $250 to build a proper reserve to fix that roof or do the tuck pointing every time.
Correct. So the roof on that 6 unit is not 6 times the cost of a roof on a 36 unit.
Yes,
but you have 36 paying in compared to the 6 paying in.
So more often than not, when you do have to do some big capital thing, you do still have to get people to throw in above and beyond what that is. So it's tough to make numbers work on even up to like 12 or 18 unit type buildings. On the CapEx stuff based off of reserves from the monthly collections. Would you agree with that?
It is tough. And, that's why on some of the rentals, I'll come in, I'll hold them for a few years, and then I'll sell them off. Because again, you're
yeah,
absolutely.
Like that. So you're like,
if everything that was built up in 05 to 08, now they're going to be coming up on needing roofs and needing, tuck pointing. So I'm like, okay, if I'm holding it for X years, and I get the value up and the rents are high, and an investor comes in and sees that and there's no cap on rentals, an investor might take it over. Or I just, again, do the quick renovation, list it for sale, and, I'm out the door.
So you're very strategic about it. We just had actually a condo in Schaumburg that we own that the huge pipe burst in 70s built complex, big building, but it's like, all right, we know there's tenant just moved out. We know there's a special assessment coming. Do we sell it today or do we hold this out? So we held it out, but yeah. So I like the idea of kind of being strategic around what's coming up in the next 36-month kind of horizon.
Did you do anything outside of the city limits, or is everything in Chicago?
I've pretty much done everything in the city. Not that I don't look towards the suburbs, but I'd say that the majority of my investment and my clients are, I'd say 70-30 city to the suburbs. I think maybe just, haven't been in the city my whole life. I mean, I know it like the back of my hand. And we all know that for people that aren't from the city, it's block by block, right? You can have a great neighborhood, you cross over the tracks or you cross over, the expressway, and now it's a night and day. So I already know how that works in the city. In the suburbs, you run into issues like city ordinances for rentals, whether it's, they have caps in the neighborhood of rentals, or they have, they want permits, or they want you to take a class every year.
Point of sale inspections.
Yeah. It's, if I can do the same thing in the city, I stick with the city for that reason.
That's how we get hired all the time as property manager out here. Is they don't want to sit through that 8-hour class one time, then we get hired. So I'm like, yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
What? So you still have the full-time job, correct?
Correct.
So you have the portfolio which you have to manage, but again, a lot of it's HOA. How much time are you spending with clients? Right, like it seems like it's a lot to balance here.
So the nice thing is, now I would say in like the last 7-8 years, because people know me as being able to invest, and for my clients being able to help them turn some pretty big profits. I don't have to spend a lot of time with clients. I like to say that my clients, either they want to learn how to build wealth and invest, whether it's their first property, their primary residence, or they want to learn how to invest and flip, how to, hold rentals. I can sit down with a client for 30, 45 minutes and explain the numbers, what the costs are, what their return would be, ARV after the renovation value would be. If it's a primary residence, like I tell them, hold it for 2 years, it's not your dream home, sell it, snowball that money into your next one, to whatever you want to do at that point. And there's times where I would say about 30% of the time with those clients, I'll literally show them one property, I'll show them the numbers. It's like, okay, yeah, let's put an offer in. So I don't have to show 30 houses to go back to the 7th one that we saw.
Are they picking that house, or are you picking that house for them?
I pick it for them.
Okay, that's the difference in a lot of realtors. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Great.
And so, they might even send me, I'm like, oh, I just saw this on Zillow. What about this one? And, the first one I'll be polite, if you want to go look at it, let's look at it. Here's the numbers when we go look at it, And after that, I just say, no, numbers don't work. And they immediately understand. So I don't have to drive around for 4 days, 5 days with the same client. Sometimes, like I said, the best is one house we see or one condo, and it's like, all right, let's put an offer in.
Yeah. Too many people are afraid to be dream killers. Right, you want to be that bad guy, but you have to be. You have to say, this doesn't work. Like, this is a waste of your time. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And no one likes having that tough conversation.
You've built that muscle because you have a limited amount of time too. At the same time, so like you're forced to like solve their problems faster for them before they realize they have a problem or have even going down the wrong route. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have those buyers that said, listen, pre-approved for $800,000. Let's just go look at houses. Cool. Let's do it. No big deal. You don't want to, you're comfortable where you're at. Let's buy you a house. Great. And sure, I'll go show them 20 houses and no problem,
Mm-hmm. So what's next? Like what's that 2-year, 5-year plan look like for Horacio?
So next is, the person that I bought my 4-unit from, has another one in the estate that they want to sell. So I'll stay there. I have to wait till January again for 1 year, cash out refi. And if I could pick up that building, great. But if not, I'll continue to invest still. I still like townhomes and condos again because it's just a lot easier. I feel it's easier. I have a property manager now. I'm at that point. I don't even want to hear about you locked yourself out. So I'm at that point. I don't even want to hear about that. I'm still helping people learn how to invest, whether it's flipping, whether it's, holding long-term, finding tenants. So I'm still working on that. And, I'm getting towards the end of, my time with day job. So I think I'll be able to focus more on real estate if I choose to do so.
Got it. I'm assuming, is there like a set date? Like there's a set date, right? Where you qualify for whatever pension. Like you know what that date is.
Yeah. So I have about 2 years left and I may stay longer. I still haven't figured it out. I have a 4-year-old. So of course, depending on what he's doing in terms of after school and what he wants to do, that may drive some of my decision. The nice thing is right now I have some colleagues where if I have showings and I can't make it or I have a home inspection, they'll cover for me. I compensate them. So it kind of works out for my schedule as well.
All right. You have a investment time span of over 20 years now. Like what would today's version of Horacio go back and tell 2002 version of yourself?
I would have told myself, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad 5 years earlier, so you don't have to keep doubting yourself. And then I think I would have started investing a lot more heavily immediately. I think from day one, I would have started investing more heavily, even with the market meltdown, and realize that whatever would have happened, people still need somewhere to live, so they're still going to pay rent, and I would have been fine. If the numbers work, I would have been fine.
So you had that span of doubting yourself and maybe not even being all in because of that doubt. That's probably some of the best advice that you could give all of our listeners right now, of like, you get all in on this because it works, and we have people on here all the time that demonstrate it works.
Absolutely. It's like Nick always says from 𝗖𝗃𝗃𝗵𝗁 Realty, he says real estate is a get-rich-slow scheme. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. And as long as you view that, it's gonna work out.
Yeah. Time's your biggest asset. We talk about it all the time. But I think what's great here, though, is everyone always gravitates towards, all right, I'm going to quit my job, right? Like, I'm going to start wholesale. I'm going to start doing this. It's like, no, like this is a supplement. Like, this doesn't have to be the end all be all. You can still go all in. You can still be pot committed and still have that money coming in. Because guess what? You're going to need it for the next project, right? Like, people just underestimate and assume because everyone on social media says so that you don't need money. You need capital.
But like, that's the grind, though. That's the grind that people don't want to commit to.
Yeah, they probably know it in the back of their head that that's exactly what needs to happen,
Yes.
but they don't want to. They don't want to admit it.
You have grinded for 20 years. You've put in your day job hours, call it 40, maybe probably even more in your line of work, and then you are committing another 20 to 30 hours a week above and beyond before when you wake up, when you go to bed, on the weekends, late at night. Like that's the grind, man. That's what a lot of people just don't get. And I love that you're sharing their story here with us.
Yeah, thank you. And it's funny because at one point I was going to quit the day job. I was like, you know what? Scheduling was horrible. It was a mess. Everything from trying to split your days off to canceling days to moving, it was just a nightmare. And I was about to quit, but then, I realized what the cost of out-of-pocket healthcare was, and let me hold on for a bit. That's kind of what held me back from doing it. It is possible to do both, right? And I think, there's still that bit of a passion for doing something, a greater good, right, from the day job. That's kind of what held me back, too, from quitting. And not just saying, okay, I'm going to continue with real estate. And I could have probably grown more by this point just doing real estate. But at the same time, there's still something in me that says, I still want to do something better than, so to speak, right? Better for the good of man, if you want to call it that. So that's why I didn't just walk away from the day job as well.
Yeah. Shifting gears, last question before we wrap here. Future of Chicago. How are you feeling? Like, your clients come in saying, I don't know if I should buy in the city. Like, what is your response to that?
I would still invest in the city because, again, regardless of the 24-hour news cycle, we've always had problems in the city. But the city's always held on because it's not only a financial capital, it's a mass transit capital. You have all modes of transportation coming into the city. You still have, Fortune 500 companies. You still have international companies moving here or opening further offices here. So you're still going to need somewhere to live, whether it's even if it's just a central business district out to, let's say, Western Avenue, and your people still need to live somewhere. And I think now with work from home, you see that you're not just tied to living downtown. You can live wherever you want in the city. Taxes are cheap, compared to the suburbs, especially once you leave downtown. And I think people don't realize this. They're just fooled into thinking, oh, it's Illinois, it's Chicago, it's Cook County, it's a ripoff. But when you really look at it, it's actually a very affordable city compared to anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, and we complain about, I just wish my assessed value would be a known factor. Like, other places do 2% of the purchase price. I was like, well, if you did 2% of your purchase price, it'd be 30% higher than what you're paying, man.
Yeah.
It's crooked and it's got its problems, but it's also like, it's not, you compare it elsewhere.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, there's some places that are a lot better, some that are a lot worse. So, all right, ready to wrap?
Ready to wrap.
Let's do it. You don't even have this sheet in front of you. Are you going to be able to do these 3 questions we've asked 300 something guests?
I was going to be able to. Now you put me on the spot, though. So, all right, Horacio, what's your unique ability? How have you been able to do this while so many other people wish they could have half your story?
I think what I've been able to do is, again, streamline the purchase process for my buyers to where I can eliminate a lot of the clutter of showing them every house in a block. I can show them what the numbers are, and if they want to build wealth, they're going to see the value in what I'm showing them. So that cuts my time in half. And when it comes to finding tenants, I think my training and experience has helped me in helping my clients find great tenants. I've been able to weed out great tenants for myself.
Cool. All right. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that has yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Like I always tell my clients too, there's no such thing as a dream home, right? Families expand, families contract, people have to relocate, there's divorce, there's children. So don't assume that you're going to save up to buy your dream home. Buy something, take those proceeds after 2 years, snowball it to what you want, and continue to build wealth.
What do you do for fun?
I've taken up tennis a lot recently again. I learned as a kid by accident, and now I've kind of gone all in.
I'm surprised everyone else is doing pickleball. You're back old school here, tennis.
Oh, yeah. I got to get my cardio in somehow. I need the competitive edge.
So, all right, what is a good book, podcast, or a self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners?
A good book that I give people, and it's not even real estate related, but it kind of translates to real estate and life, is The 4 Agreements. I forgot who the author is, but it's been very, very helpful.
I don't know that one. You know that?
I do not know that
Ooh,
one.
we got a new one.
Yeah, The 4 Agreements. Google it. I forgot the name of the author.
All right.
We'll put it in the show notes for sure. Besides yourself, name a valuable resource you recommend to other Chicago real estate investors.
I still go back to Nick Patterson and, of course, 𝗖𝗃 Realty.
All right. Horacio, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Absolutely. You can look for me either on LinkedIn, Horacio Tristan. If you want to look for me on Instagram or Facebook, I use my nickname 𝗖𝗃𝗲𝗀𝗃 on Facebook and Instagram. And for, always looking to connect with other lenders, other contractors, other realtors. So, we can always provide value for each other.
All right.
Perfect.
Chicago fact. We got to pull up our devices for this.
All right. Today we're playing for 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗀𝗀. She bought a shirt off of Straight Up Chicago Investor merch store. And our sponsor is Lavelle Law, Chance Badister. And Gladys, if myself or Horacio get this right, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by Lavelle Law.
All right. We're going to go to Brighton Park on this one. So I'm going to list four facts. One of them is false. You have to point out which one is not true.
Okay.
All right.
We got to pick a different one, each one of us. That way we get the best chance of winning.
So
All right.
Brighton Park is A, currently home of the Chicago Park District headquarters. B, Pope John Paul II visited it in 1979. C, it was the last of the 77 community areas to become part of the city after Lake Township voted to allow its annexation. Or D, the largest park in Brighton Park is in fact McKinley Park. Which one of those is a false statement?
I'll go with C.
I'm going to go with D.
C it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I imagine they could have been last annex because it's not even on the edge. Like, that's how I was kind of thinking about that.
Very good, Mark. Very good.
And I imagine it's very Catholic over there, so there's a good chance the Pope is there. Like,
Pope was there.
I would have guessed that one too. It's like a mirror image of the Northwest side.
Yeah, like,
he's making a stop there.
Yeah. All right, that's awesome. Then
I did not know until looking. I didn't realize the Chicago Park District. I used to go downtown when I worked there, for like your drug tests and stuff. I didn't realize it went from downtown to Brighton Park.
On Pershing, right? I believe.
Yeah, I learned something new.
Awesome. All right. Glad to get a $50 gift card brought to you by Lavelle Law. So nice job. We got it. We got our $50. So
awesome.
All right, man. Awesome show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
You have a wealth of knowledge that I think our people definitely value from. So thanks for coming on, Tom. Thanks always, listeners. Leave us a review. That's how other people find us. That's all I'm asking for today. And you should feel guilty if you don't leave us a review today. Rachel, thanks. Tom, thanks. Listeners, we'll see you Thursday.
Thanks all.